Good morning. Good to see everybody here this morning. Good to be here. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. It is time. Do not pay any attention to that clock in the back. It changes time daily. Time I come in, it's a little off. I know William moves it forward 5 minutes every time he walks through the door. Speaking of William, let you know he's called me twice since he's been in Portland. He said, "You warned me," and it's exactly what you said it was. He's not happy. He is not fond of Portland, Oregon at all. It's funny because he said, "There's a bunch of people walking around with backpacks." He said, "They look like a bunch of hippies." I said, "Well, they probably are. They're 20-year-old hippies." So anyway, he's he called me. He called me like the minute he set foot in the state and said, "I'm ready to come home." So he said, "I got to be here." So he said, I'll tell everybody I miss them, and he can't wait to get back home. So anyway, it's a friend of his. A friend of his he's known for a long time. He's spending some time with them, and he said next time he's going to ask that guy to come here. So he said now he remembers why he left the West Coast. I don't know if everybody saw on the Facebook page, Ivan Atkins, his sister's 2-month-old, is doing much better. Is still in, at last I heard, still in ICU, but is improving dramatically. They're still trying to figure out why the bleeding was occurring and what the deal is with a hole in the lung. But they said that there's certainly a diagnosis of pneumonia, but seems to be responding well to treatment and medication, and it seems like they're going to make a recovery. But it was just sort of a very scary situation. So he asked if we would please continue to remember that family in your prayers, and I said we certainly would. I don't know of anybody else. Anything else? Does anybody have anything else that we need to? Okay. Right. Yeah. Okay. 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 All right. Yeah, I'm going to. Helen, Warren's wife, has moved to Florida with family, so she's living down there now instead of up here. Not too long after he'd passed, apparently. So, but she said to say thank you for everything that was done up to and including his passing and his memorial service. So, we certainly, prayers for her happiness down in Florida. Anybody else? Anything else? Okay. 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 All right. So we need to remember Pat's brother-in-law and that family in your prayers. I think we mentioned him about a month ago. Yeah. So, okay. Yes, ma'am. Millie, has anybody talked to Millie this week? It's hard to get her on the phone. It's almost impossible to get her on the phone. I called from her driveway one time and I couldn't get her on the phone. That's it. And knocking, and she will not hear. I was there for about 15 minutes one day and I couldn't get her. I mean, she was probably asleep in her bed, but, it was just, I'm not going to break into somebody's house. So we'll see and she may surprise us and walk through that door, which is entirely possible. So if she doesn't, we'll make sure that we reach out to her today and see if we can't roust her and find out what's going on, see if she's okay. Anybody else? Yep. Kathy responded. I talked to her on Facebook. It was a private message on Facebook, and she says she's hoping to be back with us soon. She says it's just been a slow slog getting her foot well, and that's been the biggest problem. That's all there is. It's just it's getting where she can get around, and that's been her problem. Okay. Well, she said that she said hopefully very soon I'll be back. She said I've not forgotten anything. It's just not been able to get around. So I'm going to go. I'm going to take her at her word, and if that's what she says is going on, that's what she says is going on. Hopefully she'll get that. That'll be taken care of pretty soon. Hopefully. It's just I know it's been slow. I know Winnell was the same way. It was just when those wounds happen, especially on the sole of your foot or anywhere. It just seems like it takes forever for them to close up. And until they do, getting around is difficult because you can exacerbate the situation, end up bleeding and having all kinds of problems and open it up even further and you just gotta be very careful with it. Yeah. Okay. So remember, yeah. They were always at a family reunion. They got more family. It's like a family reunion every week with those people. Yeah, you're everywhere. Oh, I did get a message last night from Tanis. She was at the hospital with Dan. He had a migraine that it was just giving him fits. And she had one last week. That's why they weren't here last week. And she said, I don't know if we'll be there today. It depends on how long it takes for them to see him and if he can get something to kind of quell that, because she said it makes him nauseous. When he has one. So she said we may see you this morning. We plan on being there, but it depends on what time they see him and what time we get home, and that medication takes effect to get rid of that migraine. But she said he's just miserable. It was bad enough to go to the hospital for it instead of just laying inside where it's dark. All right. Anything else? All right. Let's go ahead and have a word of prayer, and we'll get started with our class. Our Father in heaven, we're grateful for the beautiful day that you've blessed us with, and we're thankful, Lord, that we were able to be here this morning. We're grateful for our health that we enjoy. We pray, Lord, that you continue to bless us in those things, and we're mindful of those that we've mentioned this morning, so many that are having problems with their health. And we pray, Lord, that you bless them with healing. We ask that you bring them back to us again very soon. We notice when they're gone, and we miss them when they're gone, and we're anxious for them to be back with us again for worship. We're mindful, Lord, also of those who are traveling and are away from us. We ask, Lord, that you give them safe passage to their destination and back to us again. Especially, Lord, we are mindful of those who have lost loved ones recently, and we ask, Lord, that you comfort them and strengthen them. We ask that you be with Helen Thompson as she's moved out of state, and we pray, Lord, that you continue to be with her as she continues in her grieving process. Thank you, Lord, for the blessings of the day. We're thankful for so many things that you do for us, the physical things, of course, but also the spiritual things. And because of this, we're thankful for the gift of your Son, Jesus, who died on the cross for us. It's in his name we pray. Amen. All right, Joshua, chapter 5. Joshua chapter 5. All right, starting in Joshua chapter 5. Last week, we had the Israelites had, of course, crossed over Jordan, and they were now in. Good morning. They were now in Canaan's land. Everything that they had been going through, everything that they had worked through, and the Lord had brought them through. He had now seen them safely on Canaan's shore. And they set up, of course, that memorial, that 12 river stone memorial, and And this was to show that the 12 tribes had passed over and they had crossed over into this promised land that had been promised so many years ago. I mean, hundreds and hundreds of years ago, this had been promised to them. And finally, it also kind of goes to show that, the Lord, when the Lord's timeline is not our timeline, right? God brought Abraham out of his father's house and brought him all the way over to this place. And Abraham went through all of this knowing that he was never going to see that promised land. He was going to live in it, but it was not going to be his. It was not going to be his family's. It was not going to be that nation's until long after he had passed. And that, of course, that's exactly what came to be. But God is not slack concerning His promise, right? When God promises something, what does He do? He delivers. He delivers, and He is literally and figuratively delivered on His promise. He's delivered them into this land, and He has delivered the land into their hand. Now, again, this is something else, and this is kind of like it parallels our journey today. The Lord said He's going to deliver, and the Lord said He's going to provide, right? Okay. God said I'm going to provide this land for you. I'm going to give you this land. It's going to be yours to possess. I'm going to deliver it into your hand. But did the Israelites still have to do something in order for that to occur? Yeah. Okay. They had to obey Him, and they also had to fight for it, didn't they? God said, I'm going to go before you into battle, but you're still going to have to fight the battle. All right? You're still going to have to go into war. Now, if you allow me to go before you, and you do as I tell you to do, and you don't err, you don't mess up. Now, I'm not saying don't make a mistake. I'm saying don't intentionally err. Like we'll see here, not too distant future, where Achan goes and he takes a portion of that was promised, it was not supposed to be taken. Okay, but he says, if you do what I tell you to do, and you act in the way I tell you to act, I'll fight your battles for you. There were battles where they didn't lose a single person. Not one person passed in battle. Every single one of them made it through that battle. All right, but that kind of tells us today that God says, I'm going to deliver you. All right, I'm going to deliver you safely. But is there still work for us to do? All right, are works still important? Yeah, works are important. We do things. Now there are those who will take that idea of we're not saved by works, and they'll take it to the nth degree where there's nothing that we do. We just sit back and allow salvation to come to us, and it'll come to us. We don't have to worry about a thing, but that's not true, is it? Okay. Salvation requires works. It does require works. We have to do something. All right? And here, God is going to deliver this land to the Israelites, but they're going to have to work for it. Okay? I'm going to do everything. I'm going to do all the hard work. You're going to do everything I tell you to do, and it'll be an easy thing for you to do. All right? So the first thing He tells them to do is, I want you to cross over, and He gives them the instructions for crossing over. The priests are going to walk in with the ark, and they're going to stand in the middle of the stream, and that stream is going to dam up, and the people are going to cross over on dry ground. All right? So we see where this has happened in chapter 4, and in chapter 5 we see something, and this gets back to the old to the law, so to speak. And we're going to read about it here in just a couple moments. All right, so let's look at this. Let's read a little bit of it, and then we'll discuss it, okay? So it was when all of the kings of the Amorites who were on the west side of the Jordan, and all the kings of the Canaanites who were by the sea, heard that the Lord had dried up the waters of the Jordan from before the children of Israel until we had crossed over, that their heart melted. Now, that idea of the heart, the idea of the heart melting, this is not the kind like from romance novels where, her heart melted or their heart melted for one another. That's not what it's talking about, right? What does it mean when it says that their heart melted? They were afraid. And it even says there was no longer any spirit in that idea of a fighting spirit, where before, if it had just been a group of people who had come up out of Egypt, and they had heard about this group of people coming up out of Egypt, these kings were pretty secure in where they were and who they were. They were secure in their nation. They were secure in the fortifications they had made. But when they had heard the work of the Lord, see, that's the key. When they heard the work of the Lord, and that this God that caused this to happen had His hand on Israel, then they were no longer had any fight left in them. They knew that there was nothing they could do to stand before God that could do something like that. All of the things that they had ascribed to their gods, if you'll notice that all of the things that they ascribed to their gods were things that had happened many, many, many years ago that they'd never seen happen. You know, they go in and talk about, well, 200 years ago our God did this. 300 years ago our God did this. But they had never seen their gods in action. But now they have seen Jehovah God in action. And He's doing things that are mind-boggling. They're staggering. All right? River Jordan is a pretty decent-sized river in most places. And He'd caused that water to be dammed up. That water had gone on, and the rest of it had been dammed up. And it even talks about it. It had gone back as far as several major cities. Well, these people standing in these cities are going, what's going on? And as they would have had to have sent somebody down to see what was happening. So they send people down to see what's happening, and they look, and here's the water damming up, and here's this big crowd of people with the priests and the ark standing in the middle of the river, and here's this vast number of people crossing over onto through dry ground. And these people come back and say, you won't believe what we just saw. Okay? And here we go. Now, all of a sudden, the name of the Lord is being magnified, and it is going on, and it's spreading even before the people. Even as they're coming into the land, the name of the Lord is being magnified in a very scary way. So it says that there was no longer any spirit left in them, and their hearts had melted. Okay, so they had lost the will to fight. God's protection over the Israelites had gone past its immediate efficacy. It past what He was able to accomplish. Now it's gone even further. Now He's scaring everybody around them. Okay, so this is important. This is one of the reasons they were able to go into so many places where the people had fled, and they just left everything behind, and they just moved in and took over a town. We're going to read about that in several occasions in Joshua. They came into town, and everybody had fled. Nobody wanted to fight. Or they came in, the people said, we'll be your servants. We want to stay, but we'll be your servants, whatever you tell us to do. We belong to you now. Okay? All right. So that's what we get in the first verse of chapter 1. God's power is being magnified, and their enemies have lost their will to fight. All right. Anybody want to add to that? It's important, isn't it? I think one of the reasons that I think one of the great things about who we are is the fact that God's name is magnified by what we do. Right. When we do things, God's name is magnified. That's why we do the things that we do. That's why we do good things, is because in that time, God did things that were destructive. Now, necessary, but they were destructive. Now, how is God's name magnified? Is it magnified by us taking up arms and marching on evil? How's God's name magnified? By spreading of the gospel, and by what else? Doing good things. As we do good unto all men, as much as it is possible for us to do so, right? That's what Scripture tells us, do good unto all men. When we do that, it does good for them, but what else does it do? It magnifies the name of God. So things have changed between the Old Testament and the New Testament, right? Now God's name is magnified by the great things, by good things, constructive things, things that are beneficial to everyone, not by massing an army and then marching on some, evil, marching against some evil and some misguided cause. That's not the way we do things. Okay. Who? Oh. Well, you could, but anyone who wanted to become a Jew could become a Jew, but you had to undergo what you had to undergo in order to become a Jew. Many didn't want to; they were perfectly happy to serve under them because God gave specific instructions on how to treat their servants. They weren't allowed to abuse. As conquerors, they were actually very, benevolent conquerors. When they came in, they said, okay, you serve us now. But by serving them, they served God. And by serving God, it was a beneficial thing. They were probably pretty happy to live under the Israelites because the people that had control over them before were not the most benevolent. So many times they were assimilated into the culture. They would do the jobs that the Israelites did not want to do, things that would be considered unclean, taking refuse out of the city, basically janitorial services. He says, one group said, we will be hewers of wood and carriers of water. Well, you had to have a lot of water and you had to have a lot of wood to support a nation that size. So these people were kept pretty busy, but that's what they said, that's what we'll do. We don't want to leave. Treat us kindly and we'll work for you. That's not a problem for us. Some assimilated. Yeah, they said, we understand who you serve. We want to serve who you serve. They took him and they made him proselyte. That's what happened. Yeah. Oh yeah. Indonesia and Philippines. Yeah. Yeah. Things that would not have been halal. Yep. Yep. And for a lot of these people, what was their alternative? Where were they going to go? I mean, they could flee. That's what they realized. They were better off being there with the Hebrews than they were going and trying to find someplace else to live. And they, like I said, when they came in, they were very benevolent, because God told them to be. They said, listen, if they surrender, you don't go in and massacre them wholesale. If you'll notice, the only people that they ever massacred wholesale were those who would not surrender, would not give up the fight. These were people who had decided they were going to fight against the Israelites and God. God said, destroy them. But when they came in and they offered up surrender, then they didn't kill them. No. God would not allow slaughtering of an innocent, especially one that wanted protection. Okay. So that's chapter 5 and verse 1. Now, there's a little bit of preparation that goes into what they're about to do. Okay? Part of being and they're not Jews at this time, okay? The term Jew came much later when Judea became the name for the area that they're living in. At this time, they're still Hebrews. They're considered Hebrews, or as God would call them, or they would call themselves Israelites because they are of the nation of Israel. But here we see if we go back to Deuteronomy. And we go back to Leviticus, there was a method by which you became a part of the covenant of God. Okay? It was for the rite of circumcision was, of course, for men only. And that was what bound them to the law. That's what set them apart. That's why baptism is called a spiritual circumcision. It is the rite by which we are set apart. That's the way in which we come in contact with the covenant of God. Now, of course, under the old law, it was for men only. Women were justified by first their father, whose house they lived in, and then by their husband, by whom they married. That's what attached them to the law. It was through that male contact. But of course, in today, that's why it says there's neither male nor female. Everybody is responsible for their own salvation. We all come in contact with the rite of baptism. Everybody is baptized. My wife is not saved through my baptism. She's saved through her own baptism, which is good because what if I were not a Christian? Could she still be a Christian? Yeah, because she's baptized. So it's better. Once again, getting back to the idea that the covenant we live under is a far greater covenant. It's a far better covenant. We're protected. Okay, so there's neither male nor female. There's neither Jew nor Greek under the new law. However, that's not what we're talking about here. Under the old law, that rite of circumcision was essential for that male to be attached to the covenant that protected them. Now, when God goes before, who was He going to go before into battle? He was going to go before His people. Okay, so in order for them to be His people, they had to be a part of His covenant. In order for them to be a part of His covenant, they had to undergo that rite. So here, God gives command to Joshua. And let's look at this in chapter 5 and verse 2. Excuse me. Move that down a little bit. At that time, the Lord said to Joshua, make flint knives for yourselves and circumcise the son of Israel again the second time. Now, why would it be necessary to do it the second time? So Joshua made flint knives for himself and circumcised the sons of Israel at the hill of the foreskins. And this is why Joshua circumcised them. Okay? There's a reason behind it. It's the idea of a second time. He's not saying the same people a second time. All of the people who came out of Egypt who were males, all the men of war, had died in the wilderness on the way. Now, why did they die in the wilderness? Their unbelief. Okay? They didn't believe they could take the promised land. So God said, okay, you won't take the promised land. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. You said we can't do it, so I won't let you do it. I'm not going to show my strength to people who have no faith in me. Okay? So all of these men of war, all these men who he had brought up out of the land of Egypt, had now died in the wilderness. And now an entirely new group of people. All right? For all the people who had come out, all those men of war who had come out of Egypt had been circumcised, but all the people born in the wilderness on the way as they came out of Egypt had not been circumcised. For the children of Israel walked 40 years in the wilderness, till all the people who were men of war who came out of Egypt were consumed because they did not obey the voice of the Lord, to whom the Lord swore that he would not show them the land which the Lord had sworn to their fathers that he would give us, a land flowing with milk and honey. Okay, so we get a little bit of an indication, kind of an understanding now. They had not undergone that rite of the covenant. We see that rite of the covenant in Genesis chapter 17 and verse 10. The idea of circumcision. Why that? Don't know. You know, question we'll have to ask God. But it was particular to that nation of Israel. Okay, we find nowhere else, no other group of people who practiced that rite. That was something that God gave them. And that may have been one of the reasons. It was something that no one else did. You weren't going to find somebody else and think, you weren't going to mistake them for the nation of Israel. It wasn't a tattoo. It wasn't a piercing. It wasn't a scarification of the body somewhere that could be visible. It wasn't anything like that. It was something that was peculiar to the nation of Israel. And that's what he chose for them, and that's what he required of them in order to show that they were part of that covenant. So we see that in Genesis 17:10. But knowing that, if they were not part of the covenant, then were they protected by God yet? Were they part of it? Were they his yet? No. So that had to be done. He wanted to make sure that they were well and truly obedient to the covenant law, and then, because he doesn't send them into battle until after this is done. Okay. But now that they did this, God's protection of them is complete. They are now sealed, so to speak. As we come up out of that water, we are sealed. God's name is written on us figuratively. Okay, and this is the same way. So he does this so that everything's good. Everything literally is kosher at this point. So now we can proceed. Now we've got something that we can proceed with. All right. In chapter 5 and verse 9, somebody read chapter 5 and verse 9 for me.
Today I have rolled away the reproach. Therefore the name of the place is called Gilgal.
Okay. Deuteronomy. Somebody turn for me. Deuteronomy 9. Deuteronomy 9, verse 28. Deuteronomy 9 and verse 28. This the terminology, the words that were used are kind of interesting. Taking away the reproach of Egypt. That's the way my translation reads. Taking away the reproach of Egypt. So they're safely in Canaan. Now they've taken away the reproach of Egypt. Somebody read Deuteronomy 9, verse 28.
It's the land from which you traveled. Because the Lord has not to the land which you traveled. And because he hated you, he has brought them out to kill them.
Okay. Now, I want you to think about that in this way, the idea of the reproach of Egypt. What was the concern? Moses goes to God on several times because God said, I'm not going to do this. I'm turning my back on these people. They're proud, they're stiff-necked, they will not obey. And Moses goes to him several times and pleads with him. He says, Lord, if you don't, then everything that our enemies, everything that your enemies said will be true. Everything that Egypt said, that God, this land that's flowing with milk and honey, this land that you're going to deliver them to, God can't fulfill his promise. Okay? That's the reproach of Egypt that he's talking about here. So what happened? When he says that he delivered them safely into Canaan, he's taken away that reproach. He's taken away the words that were spoken that said that he wasn't going to fulfill his promise. God won't fulfill his promise. He'll allow them to die in the wilderness. He'll kill them before they get there. They'll die. God will withhold his protection. They will never make it to Canaan. So God says he's taken away the reproach of Egypt. He's taken away those words that were in condemnation of him, because he's done exactly what he said he was going to do. The idea of the reproach of Egypt is not towards the children of Israel. It's the reproach against God, that God won't fulfill his promise. So because he has brought them safely to Canaan, he's taken away that reproach. He's fulfilled his promise. That promise was to take them safely out of Egypt, take them safely through the wilderness, and take them safely over Jordan into Canaan. So now God has done exactly what he said he's going to do, and no one can say, well, God doesn't fulfill his promise. God won't do what he said he was going to do. He just did. So in that way, he's taken away this reproach. He's taken away the words of condemnation, or the words of doubt, so to speak. Okay. The idea of Gilgal, that's from the Hebrew Galal, which means to roll. That's so they call it Gilgal to this day. All right. So he rolled away the reproach. All right. Chapter 5 and verse 10 and verses 10 through 12. Verses 10 through 12. Joshua 5, 10 through 12. Now the children of Israel camped in Gilgal and kept the Passover on the 14th day of the month at twilight on the plains of Jericho. And they ate of the produce of the land on the day after the Passover, unleavened bread and parched grain on the very same day. All right. We think, okay, what is Passover? What was Passover? What was that supposed to represent? God's deliverance, right? God delivered them from the hand of their enemy, and he smote their enemy. Not only did he deliver them, that was the straw that broke the camel's back, right? That was the spark that made the Egyptians send the Israelites on their way. Get out, get out, get out, go. Go, go, go. Get out of our land. They had bucked God up until this point. Well, we're not going to do it. We're not going to do it. We're not going to do it now. I'm going to let you go. But not only was it the launching point for the Israelites leaving Egypt, it was also God smiting his enemies, right? He struck his enemies, killed all the firstborn in the land of Egypt. Think about the loss of life. And all of it was because they would not listen and heed the words of the Lord. So the first Passover was participated in there in Egypt. Now they're going to participate in it again. And this time it's on the plains, and it is going to be a representative again of God delivering his people from the hands of his enemies. This is kind of a foreshadowing of what's getting ready to come with Jericho. All right. But look what he says he did. They ate of the produce of the land on the day after the Passover, unleavened bread and parched grain. And then verse 12, this is important. Then the manna ceased on the day after they had eaten the produce of the land. Okay? So this food, this I don't want to call it magical, but it is kind of like a magical food. It kept them alive. It sustained them all of these years. Because, listen, when you've got that many people, it's very difficult to settle and farm. So they're hungry. So they've been eating manna, and they've been eating manna, and they've been eating. So finally, they're able to eat of the produce of the land that God had promised to them. Okay, so this is a big deal, isn't it? It's kind of a big deal. Now they're able to partake in what's been promised to them for so many years. I'm going to give you a place that's got everything you could ever imagine. I'm going to provide for you in so many ways, and to such depth, and it's going to be overflowing. And now they're finally able to eat it. So I imagine they were probably pretty happy. They were probably pretty tired of manna. They had said that more than one occasion. We don't want this manna. It's tiresome. We don't want to eat it anymore. And once again, people complaining, but God provided for them. He didn't say I'd give you a 5-course meal. He says I'm going to give you food. And I think that's probably a little bit of a lesson for us today, right? We tire of the manna. We tire of the manna sometimes. But listen, if it weren't for the manna, what would we do? Starve to death. We'd perish for lack of food. And we look at the we look at the blessings of this life that God blesses us with, and we think, but it's manna. I'm so tired of this manna. He said, well, I could withhold the manna. What are you going to do then? You'll starve to death. You'll die. You'll perish. So, let's not complain about the good thing. I'm grateful for even the small things. I'm thankful for that. I don't have anything else, but I've got my health. Well, folks, there are folks who would give everything they got to have their health. They'd give every last penny that they have and that they can lay their hands on. They'd give that for their health. So yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And anything else, whatever else it might be. Don't look God's gift. Don't discount God's gift to us because it's important. It sustained the Israelites all of these years, and now here they're finally eating of their regular food, the good food of the land. And God said, "You don't need this anymore." So the manna ceased, and the children of Israel no longer had manna, but they ate the food of the land of Canaan that year. So it's a monumentous occasion. Lots of big occasions that are occurring at this point. They're crossing over into the land of Canaan. Now they're eating of the fruit of the land. And this is a foretaste of things that are going to come. Okay? Everything God had said He was going to do, He's done so far. So they're pretty happy with it. Okay. Get back over here. All right. Yeah. Another thing is the idea of the manna was a shadow of good things to come. We want to think about it, compare the good things of this life to the great things to come in our land of Canaan. I think that's something we need to think about as well. All right, chapter 5, verses 13 through 15. 5:13 through 15. And it came to pass, when Joshua was by Jericho, that he lifted his eyes and looked, and behold, a man stood opposite him with his sword drawn in his hand. And Joshua went to him and said to him, Are you for us or for our adversaries? So he said, No, but as commander of the army of the Lord, I have now come. And Joshua fell on his face to the earth and worshipped, and said to him, What does my Lord say to his servant? In verse 15, Then the commander of the Lord's army said to Joshua, Take your sandal off your foot, for the place where you stand is holy. And Joshua did so. Now, doing a little bit more research in this, because I always had in mind that this was certainly a representative of the Lord, right? We have to understand that because He tells Joshua to take his shoes off of his feet. Where else do we see that happening? Moses is standing before that burning bush, and it says, Take your shoes off of your feet because where you're standing is holy. Why would it be holy? Was it holy because of Moses? No, certainly not. It was holy because the Lord was in that place. Okay? So when we look at this, we have to at least reasonably assume that this is a representative of the Lord. He is this mysterious man who is there that Joshua sees is certainly a representative of the Lord. Is it God Himself in form as we see where the burning bush in regards to Moses? Well, there are those who believe that it is a representative. It is God, not God in the flesh. Okay, we know it's certainly not God. That's not the way God represents Himself. That's not the way God manifests Himself. But is it God in a representative form? Is it Christ? There are those who believe that it is a personification of Jesus Christ. Okay, there are those who believe that it is. And we did our study of the angels. That there was an avenging angel of the Lord. We know that there was a death angel, right? We did this study. It tells us in the Bible there is a death angel, one who is charged with destruction. In that case, I kind of lean toward this because of the mention of the idea of the Passover. Remember, the idea of the Passover brings to mind that there was an angel of death that went from house to house in the land of Egypt. And as it went from house to house, it took the life of that firstborn in each of those houses. Okay? I lean more towards this idea that it is the angel of death. The problem that we run into is that it says that Joshua fell to his knees, fell on his face, and he worshipped. And nowhere do we see that this angel rejected the worship, as angels did. Angels are not to be worshipped. Every time one has been tried to be worshipped, he's refused that worship. But here we don't see that. But we don't know necessarily that Joshua was worshiping the angel himself. It could be that Joshua was worshiping God when he saw this angel that has appeared before him. We're not given any more information than this, folks. We don't read about, we're not given an answer a little bit later on in the chapter and say, oh, so that's what this is. Okay? But we do read that this was certainly an angel that had the capacity for destruction because he's holding a sword in his hand. And we see where Joshua was told to take off his sandal because it was holy ground. Could it be because this angel was a representative of God and God was in that place? Don't know, because like I said, it doesn't say anything other than what we've read so far. I don't want to read too much into it. I don't want to. This is not some theological mystery that has to be solved in order for us to get anything out of the book. But it is a very interesting occurrence. It reminds you a lot of the angel that Jacob wrestled with, and people want to ascribe all manner of personification to that angel. We just don't know. We don't know. And there's some discussion about it. And that's basically what we're having here. So, is this mysterious man deity? I don't think that he is deity, but I certainly believe that he represents Jehovah God. Okay? Because of the concept of taking off his shoes because it was holy ground. And it's only holy where God is. Okay? All right. But it's interesting. Hang on a second. Let me go back to it. Excuse me. This is something that's kind of key to the verse. He says, Joshua went to him and said to him, "Are you for us or for our adversaries?" In verse 14, it's interesting. He says, "So he said," that angel, or that being, that man, whoever it is, said, "No, but as commander of the army of the Lord, I have now come." I think this is key because this tells Joshua that this battle is not Joshua's. This battle does not belong to Joshua. The battle belongs to God. The battle belongs to the Lord. So he said, "I'm not for you and I'm not for these people." He said, I'm for the Lord. If the battle is won, it is won because of the Lord, not because of anything that you do. God is in control of this. And I think it's important that Joshua realizes this as he's hearing these words. He realizes that his part is certainly important, but at the end of the day, that battle, whatever is going to happen, however this battle turns out, God's will must be done. And that kind of tells us something today, doesn't it? Who does the battle belong to? The battle belongs to God. The battle belongs to God. We do our very best, and our very best is not always good enough. Sometimes we fail even when we try our very best. We just don't get all the way where we need to be. But at the end of the day, what's the important thing? God's in control. Okay? This battle, whatever it is we come into contact with in this world, the battle belongs to God. And that's something that we need to remember. And we need to grab a hold of and keep tight hold of, because I think sometimes we fail that fails to make an impression on us. We fail to realize that. And we think that everything rises or falls on our account, and it doesn't. Okay? All right, so continuing on. More minutes. All right. In chapter 6, verses 1 through 18, we read of the account that Joshua is told to do. All right. He's given instructions. He's told what exactly it is that his part and the children of Israel, what their part is in what is to come. He gives them very specific instructions, you'll notice. He doesn't say, I want you to go out and make a noise and then come back in again. He tells them exactly. He says, "Now Jericho was securely shut up because of the children of Israel." So apparently they have gotten to the point where Jericho can see them out in the distance, out in the plains. None went out and none came in. And the Lord said to Joshua, "See, I have given Jericho into your hand, its king and the mighty men of valor." So God's already told him what's going to happen. I've given them into your hand. All right. The battle is going to go exactly the way I want it to, but there's something for you to do, which tells us again, there's something for us. There's a part for all of us to play, right? Part for all of us. We all have a part to play in the battles that we face. All right. Verse 3 starts in then his instruction. "You shall march around the city. All you men of war, you shall go around the city once. This you shall do 6 days, and 7 priests shall bear 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the ark. But the 7th day you shall march around the city 7 times, and the priests shall blow the trumpets. It shall come to pass when they make a loud blast with the ram's horn, and when you hear the sound of the trumpet, that all the people shall shout with a great shout. Then the wall of the city will fall down flat, and the people shall go up every man straight before him. Then Joshua the son of Nun called the priests and told them, Take up the ark of the covenant, and let 7 priests bear 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the ark of the Lord. And he said to the people, Proceed and march around the city, and let him who is armed advance before the ark of the Lord. So here we have our path, right? We have all of the armed men of war. They're all going before the priests. The priests are following up the men of war. And all these 7 priests are going to be shouldering the ark of the covenant. And you're going to have 7 priests with 7 ram's horns. And they're going to go before, and they're going to do this in this capacity. You notice that he does exactly what God tells him to do. All right? He doesn't deviate from it. He doesn't say, well, I know better. You know, this is how we're going to do it because this is the way the Lord has given for us to do it. So it was, when Joshua had spoken to the people, that the 7 priests bearing the 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the Lord advanced and blew the trumpets, and the ark of the covenant of the Lord followed them. The armed men went before the priests who blew the trumpets, and the rear guard came after the ark, while the priests continued blowing the trumpets. Now Joshua had commanded the people, saying, You shall not shout or make any noise, or nor shall a word proceed out of your mouth until the day I say to you, Shout, then you shall shout. So you think about how eerie this would be. I mean, think about being in that you already heard what these people had been accomplishing before they got there. And to be in this city and standing up on those walls as a guard of Jericho, as a man of war of Jericho, and they're all standing there. You know the king was up there as well. And to see these people coming out in this, and there were a large number, folks. I mean, the Israelites were enormous at this point. You see all these armed men of war. Then you see these men carrying this box on their shoulder. And you see them walking around, and they're just blowing the horn. That's it. They're just blowing the horns. And they walk around the city once, and then they go away again. You think, the first day was sort of like, is this the best they got? Is this supposed to intimidate us? Is this supposed to scare us in some way? So they all walk away. The second day, they do the same thing. You're thinking, it didn't work in the first day. What do you think is going to do? And you wonder if it became almost a laughing stock. They began to laugh at it, or if they got progressively more scared. Because, there's an anticipation leading up to that follows from something like this. So I don't know. I mean, I'm just saying, think about up there and think about what you would be thinking as you watch these people do what they're doing. And then the next day, and then the next day, and then the next day. 4 days in, 5 days in. And the 6th day, you're thinking, okay, at some point, if this is all they've got, then we really don't have much to worry about. Well, continuing on, verse 14. The 2nd day, they marched around the city once and returned to the camp. So they did 6 days. But it came to pass on the 7th day that they rose early, about the dawning of the day, and marched around the city 7 times. Had to start a little earlier, right? It's a pretty big city. They were marching all the way around it, so they started a little earlier that day. So you imagine they walked around that thing 7 times. You're thinking, oh, here we go. And they're doing it again. And then they get around and you think, okay, they're doing it again. And they do it again, and they do it again. On that day only, they marched around the city 7 times. And the 7th time it happened, when the priests blew the trumpets, that Joshua said to the people, Shout, for the Lord has given you the city. Now the city shall be doomed by the Lord to destruction, and all who are in it. Only Rahab the harlot shall live, she and all who are with her in the house, because she hid the messengers that we sent. And you, by all means, abstain from the accursed things. Now the accursed things, of course, would be the idols, the household idols of the city. Whatever the people had formed, whatever the people had hammered, whatever the people had fastened together from rock or from wood or from clay or from anything, no matter what it is, those are the accursed things. What did he say? Abstain from the accursed things. When people are rushing in, they're looking for loot. All right, they're looking for plunder. So what do they see? Oh, here's this craftily. Ooh, it looks really neat. It's a representative of something. I'm going to take this And their temptation would be to take that with them. He said, abstain from it, lest you become accursed when you take of the accursed things. The worry was not necessarily that those things in and of themselves would be harmful, but that they would take them and that they would begin to worship them. All right? We're going to stop. We'll pick this back up again next week.